Allow me to begin by sharing an insight rarely acknowledged in modern discourse. The instant you attempt to gain comprehension from others, your influence begins to erode. Observe carefully how romantic interest withers and dies. Consider this scenario. A gentleman encounters a lady who captivates his attention. He immediately begins posing inquiries, believing he's establishing rapport and building bridges of understanding. Yet what he's genuinely accomplishing is elevating her to a pedestal of superiority. And for example, subscribe to dark psychology. Decoded helps illustrate how such behavior quietly signals lowered personal value. Each inquiry he presents, whether about her profession, her origins, or her preferences in romantic partners, wordlessly communicates a devastating message. You hold the crown while I stand as the petitioner seeking entry. This dynamic isn't genuine human connection at all. It's a negotiation table, where he's already accepted the inferior position. The precise moment any lady perceives you're laboring to secure her endorsement, her regard for you has already begun its descent into oblivion, regardless of whether she maintains a pleasant demeanor and continues the interaction with superficial courtesy. The Renaissance political philosopher, Niccolò Machiavelli, famously declared that commanding fear surpasses being cherished when one cannot achieve both simultaneously. Though our discussion doesn't center on governing nations or wielding political authority, this fundamental principle penetrates deep into human behavioral science, particularly within the realm of romantic fascination. When a lady crosses paths with a gentleman who demonstrates no requirement for her stamp of approval, she experiences an inexplicable sensation, a potent mixture of psychological pressure and profound captivation. His behavioral patterns defy prediction and anticipation. He never pursues validation from external sources, but instead naturally commands it through his mere existence. You must understand that presenting excessive inquiries speaks the dialect of self-doubt and internal weakness. It broadcasts to her that her opinions and judgments hold weight in your self-perception. However, when you communicate like someone who possesses unshakable knowledge of their identity and worth, when your discourse consists of declarations, keen observations, and strategic pauses rather than questions, she begins pursuing your validation instead of you chasing hers. Because here lies the truth that society consistently fails to articulate clearly. Romantic attraction never flourishes from zones of complete comfort and predictability. Instead, it blossoms from the soil of curiosity and the unknown. The less you choose to unveil about your inner world, the more intensely she desires to decode and comprehend your essence. When you practice verbal economy and speak sparingly, she listens with heightened attention and focus. When you cease requesting her narrative and personal history, she begins attempting to inscribe herself into your ongoing story. This represents how dominance transitions hands silently, operating beneath the surface of observable interactions. Invisible, yet undeniably powerful. This shift doesn't occur through deploying niceness as a strategy, nor through engaging in manipulative games, but through achieving mastery over the sophisticated craft of regulated enigma, something even the great Niccolò Machiavelli himself would recognize as the governing principles of human longing and desire. Throughout this presentation, I shall demonstrate 6 principles rooted in Machiavellian philosophy that completely revolutionize interpersonal dynamics between men and women. Tactical approaches that invert the traditional power structure entirely. Upon completion, you'll possess comprehensive understanding of how strategic silence, unwavering composure, and commanding presence can cause a lady to become enamored with your enigmatic nature, rather than falling for your verbal expressions and spoken words. I strongly encourage you to remain engaged until the final revelation, because the concluding principle represents wisdom that the overwhelming majority of gentlemen will never encounter or master throughout their entire existence. The initial principle concerns the authority of silence and controlling the contextual framework of interactions. Silence stands among the most formidable instruments available to any gentleman, Yet simultaneously, it remains extraordinarily rare in modern discourse, because silence generates discomfort in people. And when individuals experience discomfort, they inadvertently expose their authentic selves and hidden vulnerabilities. The typical gentleman rushes frantically to occupy every moment of silence when engaging with a lady. An irrational fear grips him that she'll lose interest if the conversation doesn't maintain constant momentum and flow. Consequently, he launches into asking questions, narrating stories from his past, essentially performing an entertainment routine, desperately seeking her attention and approval. But the reality contradicts this fear entirely. Silence doesn't assassinate attraction or romantic interest whatsoever. Instead, it manufactures and cultivates it. When you abandon efforts to create impressive displays, you successfully flip the framework of interaction. You transform into the individual who listens with serene curiosity, instead of broadcasting nervous energy throughout the exchange. You permit her to occupy the conversational space, not because you're adopting a passive role, but precisely because you're exercising command over the moment's direction. Machiavelli grasped this particular species of power with remarkable clarity. He maintained the belief that human beings gravitate towards strength and demonstrations of power, and genuine strength reveals itself not through creating noise and commotion, but through practicing restraint and self-control. Within his seminal treatise, The Prince, Machiavelli articulated that a sovereign administrator must possess discernment regarding the opportune moments for expression, and when restraint serves greater advantage, reasoning that those who communicate excessively inevitably undermine their own standing and governmental legitimacy. This identical principle translates seamlessly into the domain of attraction and romantic entanglement. Whenever you restrict your commentary to exclusively moments containing genuine substance and meaningful contribution, each utterance transforms into a precious commodity, warranting her concentrated focus. Your words escalate in significance, commanding her undivided attention and forcing her consciousness to sharpen around what you're articulating. Consider the observable reality surrounding us. The individuals producing the maximum volume of sound within social gathering spaces frequently represent the most emotionally fragile and internally insecure personalities present. These individuals require constant auditory validation to experience a sense of authentic existence and visibility. Conversely, the gentleman capable of occupying silence with absolute certainty, radiating composed tranquility through his physical bearing and energetic presence, instantaneously reconstructs the atmospheric dynamics of the entire interaction. His silent presence communicates louder than any volume of words possibly could. When you transition from conventional questioning patterns, such as, "What occupation brings you income?" toward making perceptive observations like, "You exhibit the characteristics of someone who probably finds superficial conversation tedious and unfulfilling," you manufacture a transformative moment. The interaction transcends mere information gathering. It becomes about the fundamental relational power structure itself. You're no longer attempting to conduct a biographical interview with her, as though she's a subject requiring investigation and documentation. Rather, you're deliberately permitting her internal world to surface naturally, through her own volition and psychological desire to be comprehended. The psychological foundation supporting this strategy derives from established neuroscience regarding female neurological attraction patterns. Women experience inherent predisposition toward uncertainty and ambiguity. Whenever they encounter difficulty interpreting a man's true thoughts and motivations with complete clarity, their mental faculties remain perpetually engaged in active processing. Their emotional apparatus continues its constant scanning operations, attempting to process data, attempting interpretation, attempting comprehensive understanding of this enigmatic figure before them. This persistent condition creates psychological pressure, tension, and tension represents the fundamental ignition point, generating attraction and desire. Consequently, The subsequent instance you find yourself in conversation with a lady, consciously rehearse strategic pause and silence. After she finishes her communication, deliberately pause before responding. Sustain your visual connection directly into her eyes without breaking focus. Present a gentle smile, communicating warmth while maintaining complete vocal silence for several measured seconds. Permit her previous statements to persist within the conversational space, hanging there with weight and significance. Permit her consciousness to register your composed stillness and absolute equanimity, because within that intentional stillness, a remarkable transformation initiates within her psychological experience. She begins experiencing curiosity about your interior landscape and mental processes. Her imagination activates, trying to comprehend what thoughts occupy your consciousness during these pauses. When a lady dedicates herself to wondering and speculating about you, she simultaneously invests emotional energy, cognitive resources, and psychological focus directly into you. The trajectory shifts dramatically. You're no longer the pursuing party, desperately chasing comprehension and approval. Instead, you've become the individual who possesses a gravitational pull, drawing her toward you against her rational resistance. Remember this foundational principle. You cannot generate admiration in someone who has already developed appreciation for your authentic calmness and centeredness. That's precisely why silence shouldn't be understood as emptiness or conversational failure. Silence constitutes dominance, operating under sophisticated disguise. The second fundamental principle concerns the absolute prohibition against defending or justifying your conduct, your beliefs, your choices, or your decisions. Machiavelli understood this psychological reality centuries before modern psychology attempted to explain it scientifically. Among the most expeditious approaches to demolishing a lady's attraction toward you, or simultaneously destroying anyone's respect and regard for your character, involves constantly explaining yourself, perpetually clarifying your positions, eternally defending your every action. When a gentleman finds himself in this relentless pattern of justification and clarification, he's quietly admitting something profoundly damaging to his masculine authority. He's confessing that he desperately requires external permission and approval to feel psychologically secure and complete within himself. Niccolo Machiavelli articulated in The Prince that commanding respect and fear surpasses generating affection whenever both cannot coexist simultaneously. In contemporary existence, experiencing fear doesn't necessarily mean intimidating or threatening others through aggressive displays. Rather, it translates into earning genuine respect and commanding serious regard. It means functioning as a gentleman whose self-confidence flows from internal sources rather than depending upon external validation and constant reassurance from others. Whenever you discontinue offering explanations for your conduct and beliefs, you transmit a potent yet unspoken communication. It proclaims with clarity, "I comprehend exactly who I am and what I represent. My value doesn't fluctuate based on your interpretation or approval." This message disturbs people, particularly those individuals anticipating you'll compromise, contort yourself, and file down your authentic edges merely to gain social acceptance and approval. The ordinary gentleman doesn't grasp this fundamental truth. When a lady presents a challenge or test, asking questions like, "Why did you express that?" or "Do you genuinely embrace that ideology?" his nervous system activates and floods with anxiety. He panics internally. He softens his vocal tone, launches into detailed explanations, retracts previous statements, apologizes for daring to possess an authentic opinion different from her perspective. He genuinely believes he's demonstrating courtesy and gentlemanly behavior, Yet what he's actually communicating is that his psychological foundation can be destabilized through her disapproval or questioning. The authentic expression of confidence doesn't invariably announce itself through volume or aggressive displays. Frequently, it manifests as composed refusal to justify your existence and your perspectives. Sometimes it appears as answering a deliberate test, with nothing except a knowing smile and deliberate silence. Sometimes it sounds like calmly stating, "I don't believe I'm obligated to provide you with justification or explanation." Not communicated with arrogance or superior attitude, but articulated with unshakable certainty and self-knowledge. This particular approach doesn't translate into becoming discourteous or dismissive toward others. Instead, it signifies positioning yourself upon your convictions without experiencing internal trembling or doubt. If you articulated something you genuinely believe in your core, assume complete ownership of that statement. If you made a deliberate choice guided by your values, maintain your position with unwavering commitment. Because every instance you explain yourself, motivated by fear rather than genuine communication, you forfeit a little of your authentic masculine gravitas, that mysterious quietness that magnetically draws women's attention and admiration toward you. The Machiavellian gentleman comprehends human nature with remarkable accuracy. People inherently respect what they cannot entire. She doesn't experience romantic attachment to the gentleman who maintains constant presence and availability. She develops genuine affection for the gentleman whose presence she cannot anticipate or predict with certainty. Managing her emotional state rather than managing her schedule and social calendar accomplishes this feat. You achieve this through calibrated energy, deliberate vocal tone, and intentional timing of your interactions. When she demonstrates distance and emotional withdrawal, don't pursue her desperately. When she presents psychological tests and challenges, don't immediately react and become defensive. When she experiences emotional turbulence or distress, don't attempt to resolve and fix her emotional problems. Instead, mirror her composure and equanimity. You comprehend that a lady doesn't desire you to solve her emotional complications. Rather, she wants validation that your emotional capacity can contain and hold her emotional experience without destabilizing your own center. That represents authentic power. That constitutes the emotional dominance that Machiavelli would instantaneously recognize and acknowledge. Throughout political contexts, he instructed princes regarding manipulation of crowd psychology and collective emotions to preserve authority and governmental power. Within intimate relationships, the identical principle operates and applies. The gentleman, who controls the emotional atmosphere and tone of the interaction simultaneously, controls the relational framework. The gentleman who simply reacts to her emotional state and follows her lead loses control of the interaction entirely. Visualize this scenario. She accuses you of emotional distance and coldness. The psychologically weak gentleman immediately launches into self-defense. He explains himself, attempts to prove his affection, becomes flustered and reactive. The Machiavellian gentleman simply smiles with knowing composure and responds, "Perhaps you've simply become accustomed to experiencing relational chaos and turbulence." Then he deliberately shifts the conversational direction towards something completely different. Within that singular intervention, he accomplishes something remarkable. He completely restructures the emotional narrative. He remains centered while she experiences stirring emotions, intrigue, psychological tension. Yet paradoxically, she finds herself drawn toward him despite these uncomfortable sensations. This approach doesn't constitute manipulation or psychological abuse. Rather, it represents psychological intelligence and emotional mastery. Because attraction fundamentally diverges from performance and entertainment. Attraction emerges directly from emotional gravity and the psychological pull you generate. You cannot generate it through being exceptionally nice or obsessively available. You generate it through remaining psychologically grounded, emotionally stable, and unpredictable within appropriate boundaries. Machiavelli articulated that human beings operate from two fundamental driving forces, either by love or by fear. In contemporary relationships, romantic love builds upon fascination. Fascination emerges from emotional regulation and control. Consequently, never attempt to surpass a lady through superior conversation and verbal eloquence. Instead, outperform her emotionally. Never attempt to maintain her attention through constant communication. Instead, control the emotional rhythm and tempo of your interactions together. Whenever you possess capacity to elevate her heart rate and generate physical arousal through your presence alone, without requiring words to accomplish this, you've already achieved victory. Every communication you make afterward becomes merely decoration and embellishment. The authentic art of romantic attraction doesn't reside in pursuit and chasing. It manifests through presence and command. It doesn't materialize through what you communicate verbally. It appears through what she experiences emotionally when you communicate absolutely nothing at all. The fourth principle addresses the critical importance of never completely revealing your intentions and your true motivations. Machiavelli wrote, "Every prince must acquire the knowledge of how not to remain virtuous, and to employ this knowledge whenever strategic advantage demands it." He didn't advocate for becoming cruel or malicious toward others. He meant becoming strategically intelligent, playing the psychological game rather than allowing the game to control you. When addressing women and romantic dynamics, this principle carries significantly deeper implications and consequences. Never divulge your complete intentions. The instant you communicate everything you're feeling, precisely what you desire, and exactly what your subsequent moves will entail, the dynamic shifts irreversibly. The psychological game terminates completely. Not because truthfulness lacks importance or integrity fails to matter, but because predictability systematically destroys desire and romantic tension. Contemplate this reality. Whenever you explicitly express everything you feel regarding her, whenever you delineate exactly what you want from the relationship, whenever you announce your exact plans and intentions for the future, she loses all motivation for wondering and speculating. Her psychological system no longer requires engagement because you've provided complete information. The human consciousness operates with fundamental wiring for uncertainty. Uncertainty and ambiguity fuel obsessive thinking patterns, not clarity or complete transparency. That explains why Machiavelli counseled leaders regarding maintaining appearance of openness while preserving secret thinking processes. It doesn't constitute deception or dishonesty. It represents discipline and strategic thinking. It means maneuvering like water flows, appearing calm and peaceful upon the surface, while maintaining complexity and mystery in deeper layers. Ladies demonstrate respect toward gentlemen they cannot completely interpret and read. They might verbally express desire for honesty and transparency, but their deeper psychological programming craves mystery combined with integrity. They yearn for gentlemen whose subsequent actions they cannot predict with certainty, yet whose presence they simultaneously cannot resist or reject. Most gentlemen commit catastrophic errors through confessing excessive emotion prematurely and revealing too much too quickly. They overstate their intentions before they've even commenced the actual interaction or established genuine connection. Many individuals disclose their entire emotional landscape long before entering any competitive or relational dynamic. Once you reveal every feeling and intention, you immediately reduce your influence. Machiavelli shaped his thinking around perception, timing, and control. People rarely follow raw facts. They follow convincing stories, selective disclosure, and disciplined silence. Truth delivered at the right moment strengthens advantage. Truth delivered impulsively destroys it. In relationships, this becomes a practice of measured expression. You share only parts of what you feel and allow her imagination to fill the remaining space. You offer spontaneous actions instead of continuous promises. Words used sparingly gain value. Excessive explanation creates distance. Power grows in the gap between what you express and what you hold back. Too much openness hands others a full map of how to influence you. Too much silence creates confusion, but balanced mystery creates interest, attention, and psychological pursuit. When she cannot read you fully, she invests effort trying to understand you. Gentle restraint replaces desperate approval seeking. Intrigue strengthens attraction, while chaos repels it. The goal is not manipulation. It is disciplined presence. Confident men speak with intention, observe more than they react, and remain calm when pressured. Their silence signals stability rather than avoidance. That stability becomes rare and compelling. Emotional regulation becomes the final element. The man who cannot govern his reactions becomes easily guided by anyone who can. Arguments, pleading, and outbursts broadcast predictability. Composure communicates inner authority. Machiavelli and the Stoics both taught that self-mastery precedes influence. When you maintain control over your responses, you shape the environment around you. Desire grows from uncertainty. Respect grows from measured behavior. The man who embodies both becomes unforgettable without force or noise.